All right, Pathfinders, welcome to our latest edition of our conversations. We're continuing the conversation. We have the mobile podcast studio, and we have taken it on the road again. We truly are mobile down at RAF Croughton so that I can have a conversation with TSgt Lesa Smith from our outstanding 422nd Medical Squadron here at RAF Croughton. So, Lesa, thanks for joining me. Thanks for having a conversation.
Sir. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you
Yes,
here.
Sir.
So, this month, for January, it is a natural fit. And in fact, this month we are commemorating MLK Day, Martin Luther King Jr., and all of his accomplishments. And the thing that struck me as I was thinking about this is this is not a black commemoration. This is an American commemoration of a great American. And so I wanted to sit down and get your perspectives. But before we talk about MLK, Lesa, can you tell me your story? Where are you from? Where did you grow up? How did you get to the Air Force, and how did you get here to RAF Croughton?
Absolutely. So I am third generation Air Force active duty service.
Wow.
My grandfather on my mother's side, he was retired as Chief Master Sergeant. Both my parents served over 20 years each. Wow. My dad retired as a full bird colonel, and my mother retired as a Master Sergeant. So I have two siblings that are serving with me right now. My brother is a chaplain, and my sister is a nurse. So wow. I have a long history of Air Force service that I'm very proud of and take pride in that. My first duty assignment was actually Lake and Heath down the street.
Oh, right.
So, and my second one was Randolph. So I was at ATC for about 4 years. So I had an opportunity to understand the wing, understand the MAGCOM, and then Croughton is my third one. And I had the opportunity to have my education completed. So I finished my bachelor's in 2016 when I was stationed at Randolph, and I finished my master's in 2019 while I'm stationed here. So that's a little bit about me. I'm married to a reservist individual. He's also a civilian that works here. He's a tech sergeant as well, so we're TSgt Smith. Yeah. So we enjoy being here.
You are truly you're not just the great American story, you're the great American Air Force story with your family. That's outstanding. And have you always been in the medical field? Is that where you started out?
That is where I started out. So I'm dental by trade.
Okay.
So I've been dental for 9 years.
Yeah, yes, outstanding. It is great to have you here and have you on the team. So, Lesa, as we said up front, we are commemorating Martin Luther King Jr. this week. What makes that special to you? What is it about that is something that you want to share with the wing? What's your message for us on Martin Luther King Jr. Day?
So Martin Luther King is an epitome of the American citizen. He is the epitome of America. He is education, which is very important to me, is kind of one of the things that reading his bio and even going through some of his history, just preparing for today was one of the things that he had his bachelor's degree, he got his graduate degree, he went to seminary, and he got his doctorate. That's a big piece to American and the American dream in regards to the education piece, but not only he was active in his community, he was a pinnacle of the Civil Rights Act and the forefront of it with the sharing of others and who take that upon themselves too.
I love that you talk about education because, you've probably heard me say it before. What makes the U.S. Air Force the greatest Air Force in the world, I would say the greatest military in the world, I believe it's our people, obviously, but it's our education. We have non-commissioned officers with master's degrees, as it's not an unusual thing. That's amazing, and I love that you can trace that back and talk about Martin Luther King Jr. Making education important at a time when I'm sure that was not easy.
Right.
As a black man in America, that probably was quite challenging for him in a lot of ways too. And yet he overcame that. And I just think that's a great story.
Yeah.
So we say here in the 501st, Pathfinders are diverse. What are your thoughts, thinking about Martin Luther King Jr., what are your thoughts about how we can be diverse? What are your thoughts about how we can celebrate diversity? How do we make positive change here in the wing and in the Air Force?
I think having those continuous conversations in regard to diversity and taking the time to getting to know your people. That's a big part of not only being a leader, but a wingman. So I take the time each day to sit down and talk to each one of my people in my section. I'm a flight chief. I'm honored to be a flight chief. I get to take that time to sit down and talk. One of my troops is learning Japanese. It's just taking the time to understand a different culture.
Learning Japanese in the middle of England.
Exactly. He did come from Japan, at his previous location. So it's kind of one of those things of just taking that time to spend with individuals and continuing the conversation and not forgetting about not only your own personal history, but learning about someone else's and a different ethnicity associated with them.
How, Lesa, do you carry on those conversations? I mean, I think you're exactly right. It's why we have this series of podcasts we're doing about continuing the conversation. How do you have a conversation with your airmen?
So similar to the art piece that I did for this event today, it's a conversation piece. It can be something as simple as that. Hey, I saw a picture the other day that reminded me of the morals of Martin Luther King. The reason for the piece that I did and the reason why it has so many colors in it is because we are a diverse nation. And when Martin Luther King was talking, he was not just talking about the African-American struggle. He was talking about the American struggle and we as people being united. And that was his dream, not only for his family, but us as Americans.
Yeah, it's awesome. I know before we came here to England, Christina and I spent some time in Montgomery, Alabama, doing our pre-command training. And we did a little walking around, and we actually went by Martin Luther King Jr.'s house. And it is a simple home, and yet such a powerful symbol of America. Absolutely. And just as you said, whether it's art or whether it's literature or whether it's music, those things those are great things, as you said, to start a conversation. I really appreciate that. So as I was coming down here this morning, Lesa, I was thinking about what would Martin Luther King Jr. think about America today if he were still alive? And the conclusion I came to is I think he would be extremely proud of where we've come as a nation. From the 1960s and the Civil Rights Movement, I think he'd be extremely proud of the progress we've made. We have had a black president of the United States. We currently have a black chief of staff of the Air Force. I think things that were maybe a little bit unimaginable to the average American in the 1960s have completely come to fruition. But I also think he would recognize that we still have a lot of work to do. When you look at the events of the tragedy of George Floyd and other incidents that we've talked about over the past year, I think he would recognize that there's still a lot of work to do. But I would love to get your perspective on that.
I agree. I do agree in regards to there's work that still needs to be done. But I think we have made strides as a nation, and not only as a nation, but as an Air Force. The ability to just have this conversation is a stride in itself. So just having that time and taking that time to have those conversations, whether they're in a large group or in a one-on-one like we're having today, is the impact that Martin Luther King wanted and he wants us to continue to have, so that we learn from each other and understand each other. We are not black, white, Hispanic, Italian, whatever the case may be. We are human beings. We're
all Americans.
Exactly. We're all American. But also understanding and taking the time to understand what our host nation is doing right now. What are they doing? What is their rich history? Being involved associated with that. Understanding what Boxing Day is, taking that time to just understand the culture that is around us.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great message, especially for the 501st Combat Support Wing, whether we are Pathfinders here in the United Kingdom or in Norway or wherever around the world, our deployed Pathfinders. That is a great message. So, Lesa, hey, I want to say thanks. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for helping me to understand a little bit more about Martin Luther King Jr., and thanks for sharing this with the wing. Thanks for helping me continue a conversation.
Absolutely, sir.
Thanks. All right, Pathfinders, thanks for tuning in. Look forward to carrying on the conversation again in the near future.